When we talk about filing back tax returns with the IRS, here's the overview that you really need to have a solid understanding on. First things first, let's talk about back tax returns at a glance. So, not filing a required return is a serious issue with the IRS. Everybody knows that. If you don't file, the IRS can file a return for you, and you don't want that because they will add some taxes and penalties that you might not need or want anyway. You should take special care when preparing and filing late returns because the IRS gives them extra scrutiny. And if you need help, if you have a complicated, quote unquote, complicated tax return, please get expert help, okay? So most taxpayers are required to file a tax return every year. So the IRS keeps a record of taxpayers who are required to file but don't, and the IRS can pursue those returns. That can mean stiff consequences and increasing complications. If you have back tax returns, the IRS can charge you expensive penalties, hold your refund, and even file a return for you without any credit or deductions in your favor. And they call it a substitute return, a substitute for return. Okay, so whether you have one or many returns to file, you or your tax pro should start taking steps right away to file an accurate and complete tax return that will get you back in good standing with the authorities. So what are we talking about here? What are back taxes, by the way? Let's go back to the origins, 101. Back taxes refer to an outstanding federal or state tax liability from a prior year. And it could be several prior years too. So federal income tax returns are typically due each year on April 15th for the prior year. So you may request an extension to file your taxes, which gives you another 6 months to file your return. However, even if your extension is approved, you must still pay your tax bill by the required due date. So this is generally April 15th for most individual tax filers. Okay, so there are a lot of benefits when it comes to filing taxes when you really think about it. So you can claim a tax refund. If you haven't filed a tax return and the IRS owes you money, you have a limited number of years to claim your refund. You can avoid a substitute for return and SFR. I was just talking about that later on earlier. If you haven't filed a tax return in years, the IRS can prepare an SFR, a substitute for return, on your behalf and send you an invoice for the tax it says is due. The problem is, while the IRS gets copies of 1099s and W-2s reporting your income, it doesn't have much information on your deductions. You can also avoid IRS collection actions when you file your return. So you have a constellation of benefits that come with filing your tax returns all the time. So please do it. So now let's just talk about the steps you need to follow right now if you want to file back tax returns with the IRS. Step number 1. How do you actually file back tax returns? Well, you need to get all the information needed to file the past due return. So you want to start by requesting your wage and income transcripts from the IRS. These transcripts will help you identify the forms W-2 and 1099 that you will need to prepare your return with. You can also order your account transcript to see any estimated tax payments or other credits posted to your account for that tax year. Okay, so there is a way to research your IRS account. If you need more information about that, please let us know. We'll certainly help you out. So you want to gather information about self-employment, investments, and any other income that is not on file with the IRS. You want to review your situation and deductions. You want to review your situation for possible deductions and credits, okay? And the cool thing is that if necessary, you want to ask the IRS for more time to file the late return to avoid any enforcement actions such as a substitute for return, a levy, or a lien. And you want to identify any special processing needed for your late filed return, such as a date stamping process or filing with an IRS compliance unit. And the thing you need to understand here is that if you have several past due returns to file, the IRS normally requires that you file returns for the current year and past 6 years. But your specific facts and IRS rules will determine how far back you should file. So it's always on a case-by-case basis, okay? And so the bottom line here is that if you have all your tax documents and you just haven't filed yet, just make sure that you actually contact institutions such as banks, brokerages, and mortgage companies. These days they have all their info online, okay? And they can make those tax documents available online for you. So, for example, if you are missing information on investment income or a mortgage interest statement, try logging into your online account to access a copy. Okay, this is important. And you can also review bank and credit card statements for deductions. Your wage and income transcript will not include things like charitable deductions or business expenses. So get copies of your bank accounts and credit card statements for the years in question and look for any deductible expenses. You may not be able to recreate every tax record you are missing, but this should be a great start. Okay, so when we talk about the forms that you need to file, that you need for filing back taxes, you need to have a W-2, a 1099-G if you received unemployment benefits, 1099 MIS or 1099 NEC, 1099 INT or DIV if you had interest, income, or dividends, Form SSA 1099 if you got Social Security benefits, Form 1098 if you received over $600 of mortgage interest, Form 98T if you pay tuition expenses, and records that prove that you are eligible for certain deductions and credits. Step number 2. So, by the way, I just want to quickly remind you, today's topic, we're speaking about how to file back tax returns with the IRS. What you want to do next is you want to complete the return and submit it to the appropriate IRS unit. So please make sure that you pay extra attention here. Why? Because the IRS will also actually scrutinize your late returns like crazy. They will go granular, making sure that you are actually not making any mistake or not actually reporting anything fraudulent. Okay, so you want to complete your tax returns accurately. It's best to double check your return against your IRS transcripts to make sure that you have included all of your income as it was reported to the IRS, and that you included all your withholding estimated tax payments. If you owe and cannot pay the full amount, consider requesting a payment arrangement with the filed return. Attach a penalty relief request with the return if applicable. If you have one past due return to file, you may qualify for penalty relief on any failure to file and failure to pay penalties. If you have multiple returns to file, it's more complicated to process the return and manage the resulting penalties and balances owed. So you will need to investigate your penalty relief options further in this complex situation. So please contact an EA, a CPA, or a tax attorney, and they will certainly help you out. Okay, but please make sure that you are sending your return to the right IRS location too, though, because it's very important. And last but not the least, make sure that you got proof, that you have actually proof that you filed in case the IRS doesn't process your return or you experience related compliance activity like IRS collection notices, a lien, a levy, or an unfiled return investigation. So this is really important. Okay, and so when we talk about preparing and filing your tax returns, I'm just speaking about making sure that you are thorough here. Okay, you want to monitor return processing and other compliance activities. So you want to periodically request your account transcripts or contact the appropriate IRS unit to make sure that the IRS processed your return. And if the IRS took prior actions on the unfiled return, such as filing an SFR, follow up to ensure that the IRS closed the case with no matters outstanding. Really important. The IRS says it typically takes 6 weeks to process past due returns that don't have errors, though the agency is currently taking longer than usual to do just about everything. So if you want to find out the status of your past due tax return, you can call the IRS at 1-800-829-1040. 1-800-829-1040. You need to have your Social Security number or individual taxpayer identification number, your birthday, your filing status, your prior year's return, and any letters the IRS previously sent you. Okay, and you can also ask for something called a penalty waiver. So there are generally 2 reasons the IRS might consider waiving your penalties. You have reasonable cause and first-time penalty abatement. So reasonable cause means the IRS might waive penalties if you didn't file tax returns because of extenuating circumstances such as a natural disaster, illness, or death of an immediate family member. And first-time penalty abatement means the IRS may do you a one-time favor and remove your penalties if you normally file tax returns on time. Okay, very important. Now, let me talk to you about if you need expert help. And because the thing is, when we talk about back tax returns, and it's not always easy, especially if you have, let's say you haven't filed taxes in a long time and you have quote unquote complicated tax returns. It's just better to enroll the help of a professional. Okay, not enroll, to enlist the help of a professional. Why? Because this professional not only understand the tax rules better than you, they have experience in handling this type of processes. They may have dealt with the IRS in the past. So you basically have a trifecta in your favor here. Okay, experience, better understanding of the rules, and a familiarity with how the IRS operates. One thing I want to say here is when we talk about getting expert help, I'm not asking you to actually get any kind of help. Depending on the complexity of your tax returns, you might want to reach out to an EA directly, an EA meaning an enrolled agent, a tax attorney, or a certified public accountant, CPA, okay? Because a tax professional overall can help you track down all the information you will need to file a past due return, resolve any related compliance issues, and communicate with the IRS. When you really think about it, this is bonanza for you. If you need help completing your past due return, you can also use tax preparation software. Okay, so if you were to actually hire a tax professional to kind of help you out, when you actually go to your appointment with that professional, please bring the following items: a copy of your notices, especially the most recent notices on the unfiled tax years, any information statements from W-2 or 1099 that you may have for the years in question, any state withholding or estimated tax payments you made, information needed to complete your tax return. If you have a levy in place, your employers and or financial institutions contact information. We're speaking here about the name, address, phone, and fax number, and a copy of any tax returns filed the year before and after the unfiled years in question. So those are the 6 items that you need to bring to your appointment. Okay, and please be prepared, because if the professional is asking you more questions about the years in which you haven't filed any taxes, be ready to provide clear answers, and please always be honest. Very important. Let's just quickly talk about what really happens if you don't file back taxes. I'm sure that you can imagine already, but I'm just going to say it anyway, because I want to reiterate the importance of filing taxes at all times, every year. Okay, just want to quickly remind you of today's topic, dear listeners. We are talking about how to file back tax returns with the IRS. So what really happens? So if you have back taxes, it's important to file a past due tax return as soon as possible. If you don't file or pay your taxes in full by the deadline, the IRS will begin to charge penalties on the amount you owe. So there are 2 types of penalties. Actually, there are a lot of them, but there are 2 primary ones. So you have failure to file penalty. So if you miss your filing deadline and have not filed an extension, the IRS imposes the penalty of 5% of the amount of your unpaid taxes, and the IRS will continue to charge an additional 5% each month for up to 5 months. There is also an additional late filing penalty for returns that are filed more than 60 days after their due date. If your return was due, let's say last year, for example, your penalty is equal to the full amount of your your overdue tax bill. Okay, and this is really important. Now, one thing I want to say here is that in addition to the failure to file penalty, you have the failure to pay penalty. So if you don't pay your taxes by the deadline, the IRS will charge a 0.5% penalty for each month that your payment is late. The maximum failure to pay penalty is 25%. Keep in mind, though, that interest will accrue until your tax liability is paid in full. There is also a penalty for underpaying estimated taxes, which are typically due on April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and January 15th. So this is really important. Now, for the first quarter of this year, the penalty for underpayments is 3%. So in addition to interest and penalties, other inconveniences can result from not filing and paying your taxes. For example, the IRS will not issue refunds to taxpayers who are past due. You may have trouble getting a mortgage, federal financial aid, or other loans. You will not receive credit towards Social Security benefits for self-employment income. The IRS may file a substitute return for you, which may not include all the credits and deductions for which you qualify. The IRS will begin collections, which could include a levy on your bank account or paycheck, or a federal tax lien on your property. You may be subject to additional enforcement penalties or criminal charges. So, what if you cannot afford to pay back taxes? I mean, this is something that a lot of folks have to deal with. Well, the IRS offers several options to assist taxpayers who cannot pay their tax liability. However, if you owe back taxes, it's up to you to contact the IRS for assistance. If you do nothing, the IRS will continue to charge interest on your unpaid taxes. So, some options for individuals who cannot afford tax payments include request to delay collections, propose an offer in compromise, apply for reasonable cause assistance, apply for penalty abatement relief, request an installment agreement. In some cases, you may need professional help preparing an offer in compromise or other solution for your unpaid tax liability. So you want to try to avoid tax settlement firms that claim to offer an easy solution to reduce your debt. These companies often charge high fees and make promises that are nearly impossible to keep. So taxpayers in this situation should contact a qualified tax attorney, an EA, or a CPA who can evaluate their situation and provide a recommendation. Okay, so the key is to get help as soon as possible to limit penalty charges and accruing interest. And this is really important. Ideally, this is before you receive notice from the IRS. The IRS has a directory of approved federal tax preparers that includes attorneys, CPAs, and EAs. Okay, this is really important. And so please think about that. And one thing I want to say here is that if you cannot afford to pay back taxes, always request an installment agreement. Always request an offer in compromise. Okay, so, and you can always call the IRS at 1-800-829-1040. When we talk about an installment agreement, you need to file Form 9465. Okay, and so, or if you are an individual who owes less than 50 grand, you can apply with that online payment agreement tool. So fees start at $31 but vary based on your income level, how much you owe, how much you pay, how you pay, and how you set up the long-term payment plan. So that's for the installment agreement. You can also request an offer in compromise. So if paying your bill would be a serious financial hardship, you might consider an offer in compromise, which is essentially a settlement with the IRS for less than your total bill. So the IRS warns that this program is not for everyone, given its restrictions and rigor. So fees depend on your income, but starts at $205 plus an initial payment on your bill. Okay, and you can actually apply for an offer in compromise, or OIC, by completing Form 656. Before I quickly finish today's conversation, I just want to share with you a few things that are good to know so that you can actually plan your taxes in the future. You can plan your tax filing in the future. And the thing here is that when we talk about how many years you can file back taxes, the IRS says that it will accept all delinquent returns submitted by a taxpayer, whether upon his or her own initiative or at the request of a service representative, except in cases of fraud or intentional avoidance. Okay, so taxpayers can file back taxes for as many years as they are behind. And if you want to file back taxes without records, well, the thing is, you got to be a little creative here. Why? Because you will need records in order to file your past due tax returns. To get your old tax data, reach out to the entities that issue the prior year documents or request a transcript using the instructions that I just laid out earlier. Okay, the IRS says that wage and income transcripts are available for a decade, but watch out, information about local and state taxes is not included. And so, how long does the IRS have to collect back taxes, you might ask? Well, the thing is that they have a statute of limitation, but the laws keep changing. Normally, the IRS is supposed to assess taxes you owe within 3 years of you filing a return or its due date. But if you omit a substantial amount of income, gifts, or excise tax on your return, it has 6 years to do so. If your return was fraudulent, though, there's no limit to how long it can take, okay? And so from there, the IRS has 10 years to actually collect the payment. And so the thing is, you have to understand, how much does it cost to file back taxes? Well, if you owe the IRS, there are fees for not filing your taxes and paying the balance on time. You may also qualify for a first-time penalty abatement, but the actual filing does not cost extra, depending on what preparer you use. You may be able to file for free with a provider like Free Tax USA, though you might have to pay for postage to mail in the printed return, okay? And you can, so the bottom line is you can actually file back taxes electronically, not a problem. You just need to make sure that you find a provider that actually does that. And we have a lot of players out there. And but if you need any question, please let us know. We will certainly send you a link to some of the providers that are actually that can actually help you file back taxes electronically. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I was just talking to you about how to file back tax returns with the IRS. So I explained certain things. I explained to you how to file back tax returns, how to get expert help, what happens if you don't file back taxes, what if you cannot afford to pay back taxes, and something that's pretty good to know at the end. Thank you. I'll speak to you another time, but until then, remember, stay marvelous.